Hello and welcome to week 17. This is actually a very exciting week because we are at the end of unit 3. So by now we should be pretty comfortable with chords, playing their inversions, and even inversion blending them together. And then, as we'll be doing today with 2 octave scales, hopefully we have pushed out from the middle of the piano and established a little bit more territory on both the bass and the treble clef sides. All right. Today we are also going to be doing our last week of our rhythm warm-up with 8th note syncopation. All right, so that's really exciting. Starting in the next unit, we will be looking at triplets. Okay, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, we have our 2 octave scales, our final 3 today. We'll do those hands separately, hands together, obviously ascending and descending, and then I wrote us a waltz in the key of B major to look at for sight reading today. Let's head on over to the drum and get warmed up. Okay. Here we are with our week 17 rhythm warm-up, and this is a very special one because it is actually going to be our last syncopation warm-up for now. Starting next week in the next unit, we'll start looking at triplets. So congratulations on all the hard work on the 8th note syncopation. I hope that it feels easy now, along with all the fun stuff we do with the metronome. And I'm looking forward to doing triplets next week, but for today, we'll start on line 1. We're going to start with the metronome at 50 BPM. It will symbolize the downbeats, and here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to switch our hands. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Top line, hands together. 1 and 2 and 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alrighty, let's check out line 2. Let's turn our metronome up to 55 BPM, and we will now hear the click of the metronome on the upbeats. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Switch your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Hands together, top line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, we're going to increase our tempo now to 60 BPM, although the metronome will be on halftime, so it will be on 30, and the clicks will now represent the first and the third upbeats. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Top line hands together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Gotta love it when there's a lot of space there, right? You really have to hold on to those tempos internally. All right, now we're going to speed up to 70 BPM, although the metronome will be set to 35 at halftime, and the metronome will now represent the second and the fourth upbeat. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Switch hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Top line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is. Excellent. Looking forward to starting triplets with you next week. And let's head back on over to the piano. All right, let's talk about our 2-octave scales today. We're going to be doing E flat major, B flat major, and F major, okay? Now remember, we're always alternating between groups of 3 fingers and groups of 4 fingers, as these colors are indicating throughout the tables. Now, on the black note scales, remember we start out a little differently than the pattern ends up being. Like once the pattern unravels and you're going, you're always going to have your 3rd finger or your 4th finger on E flat or B flat. But in this case, we start with our 2nd finger because it's easier to start with these 2 fingers than it is to start with these 2 fingers or these 2 fingers. It's a tiny little detail. Don't get too hung up on it. And then, of course, we're going to be doing our hands separately, hands together, ascending and descending. Let's go ahead and take a look at them on the piano. All right, let's start with E flat major. We're going to do our right hand first, and we'll start with our 2nd finger on the E flat. Let's do our left hand. And finally, let's put them hands together. Fantastic. Alrighty, our next scale is going to be B flat, so we'll start that with our right hand and it will go like this. Let's take a look at the left hand. And finally, we'll put them hands together. Let's look at the F major scale, starting with our right hand. And then we're going to take a look at the left hand. And we'll put our hands together now. There you have it. Don't forget to go slow. Take your time. Remember, we want to not only absorb the muscle memory of our scales, which is the alternating 3 and 4, but we also want to absorb the visual shape of the keys. To me, when I'm playing these scales, I see the shapes of their white keys and their black keys burned into my brain so much that I could not ever miss them. When I think of E flat, the piano turns into only the E flat keys, right? So anyways, take your time with that, and starting next week, we'll be looking at 4-note chords. So for today's sight reading, I wrote us a waltz. Now remember, a waltz is a piece that is in 3 4, all right? So our measures are going to have 3 downbeats in them and 3 upbeats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And a waltz has a very cool shape. It sort of, you know, when you have 3 in music, 3 gives you more of this circular shape than anything that's divisible by 2, which gives you more of a back and forth shape, right? So the waltz is a very danceable music because that 3 feels so much fun. And so we'll see some waltz technique in here. Now the other thing about this piece is that, as the title implies, I wrote it in the key of B major because this is a great key. Sure, it has a lot of sharps, but we know that, and we also know that that means it's easy, because that means it's just all 5 of the black keys and just 2 white keys, which are B and E. So that's not going to be any problem, all right? Now, before we zoom in and take a microscopic look at the harmonies, let's take a macroscopic look at just the form of this piece, because this is always a great way to approach your pieces. Remember, first, what key signature is it in? What time signature? How is it going to feel? What color is it going to be, right? Most important. Then we take a look at the road map. So what is going to happen on this piece? Well, first of all, I noticed that in the first phrase, we have a repeat, all right? And so whenever you have a repeat at the beginning of a piece, you don't have to put another repeat right here. So what this is telling us is that we're going to play from the beginning, we're going to hit this repeat, and then we're going to read this one more time. But the second time we do that, we'll move on down here, okay? Now, if you see repeats within a piece, because you can do this anytime to save space and not have to write the same number of measures 2 times in a row, right? Let's say we wanted to repeat from here to here. Well, in that case, you would have to put 1 repeat at the end and 1 repeat right here to kind of bracket it in. But at the very beginning of a piece, you don't have to do the double bracket. You just have 1 repeat, and we know that that's going to repeat back to the beginning, okay? So that is our intro, all right? Now, one of my favorite composition professors used to talk about composing sort of like a building, right? So if you think about it, when you first approach a building, you see the outside of the building, and it's usually meant to have an effect on you, right? The landscaping, the woodwork, the stonework, whatever it is, the paint is meant to sort of make an impression on you from the outside, and that's what our intro is, okay? Now the next thing that we're going to have is our entryway, okay? So the entryway is not the most interesting thing ever. It leads us to the main room, right? And so we've got this nice little entryway right here where we set up the time, we set up the feel, we set up the key for everybody's ears, and then the dance begins when we enter into the main chamber of the composition, which is right here. All right, now as far as the theme goes, we can read the melody, starts here, continues on through here, and then winds up right there. That is one complete statement of the melody, which is why I placed this apostrophe right here. This is a breath mark. If you're a choir person, you'll see these a lot because these are used to indicate where they want you to breathe. Now, we don't necessarily need to breathe as a pianist, but I mean, we do need to breathe, but we need to get in the habit of playing our instrument as if it did require breath, like a singer or a horn player, because that is what gives our music more life, right? When our music breathes, because melody is usually connected to the breath, all right? So here we breathe. It's the end of that section. And then, as you can see, it's going to sort of repeat, all right? So it's a very simple melodic concept. We're going to play the melody. We're going to play it 2 times, but the second time we play it, it's going to be a little bit different, because that's got to lead us to the outro, all right? So we're going to be looking for 3 different sections. We have our intro, we have the theme with the little entryway, right? We have the theme one more time, and then we have the outro, all right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the harmony of these sections, all right? Now, for the intro, what I set up was a little machine. I like to think sometimes of harmonies as a little machine that takes you and turns you around, and sometimes it can be a big elaborate machine that takes you all the way over here and comes back, and sometimes it's just a little fun thing that turns you around quickly, and that's what this little intro is, okay? So what we have here is something very common. We have a 1, then we have over here, we have our minor 2, and then to our 5, 7, all right? Now we've talked about the 2 leading to the 5 because those chords are adjacent to each other on the circle of fifths, and therefore it sounds good to our ears. So whenever you're composing one of these little harmonic mechanisms, right, the most interesting thing is really going to come right here. Because we have our 1, we know we have to start there. We know we want to end up on our 5. We know that the 2 is going to sound pretty good leading to the 5. So the most creative one we can really do is this chord right here. What do we want to jump away from the 1 with? And then ultimately use the 2 to lead us back. And in this case, I used a diminished chord, all right? And what I did is I used a common tone diminished chord. Common tone diminished chord. Because it also has a B, just like our 1 does. And so what we ended up doing was we used a B diminished chord right there. It's a little bit of flavor. I'm not going to go over diminished too much right now, and I know we have not officially put that in our tool set yet, but we will. It's coming in the very next unit, okay? So for now, what we have is we have the 1, then we have its common tone. Instead of having a 1 major, we have a 1 diminished, which I'll just write B diminished right there. Then we have our 2 and our 5. That turns us around, brings us back to the beginning. We do it again. It's a little fanfare, and then the piece begins, all right? Now, this is something that I like that you hear in a lot of orchestral works, where you kind of just set up this groove. It's just a 1 chord all the way across the board, until the theme finally enters, okay? So that's our B, and one thing you should be doing at this point is kind of establishing your territory. We notice that we do see in our left hand, line, line, line. All right, that's our B major chord. We don't need to read that. We know what a B major chord feels like. We've practiced it many times by now, okay? So we notice that we do have a B right here. So we're gonna have our 1 where our melody comes in. In a waltz, there's really nothing better than the sound of the bass voice descending chromatically or descending diatonically down the scale. And that's kind of what's going to be set up here. So when we do lead this voice right here to the A sharp, what we end up getting is the 3 chord, all right? Now from the 3 chord, it's going to take us to the 6 chord, all right? From the 6 chord, it's going to take us to the 2 chord. Now we're going to stay on the 2 chord for 1 more. It's going to take us to our 5, 7. Now, here is that B diminished again, all right? Because remember, as a composer, you don't want to just use something once. Once you introduce a character into your story, they need to be there for the rest of the story, or at least make another appearance. So we did use that B diminished again, which leads very nicely back to that 5, 7. That's one of the cool things about diminished chords. They're sort of these little things that fill in the gaps between the cracks. You know, they can lead to many different chords within the scale and things like that. So everyone loves diminished chords. All right, onward and onward. The 5, 7 means we have an open cadence right here, and we will be coming back to this, to our beginning section once again. Here we have our minor 3. Now something interesting happens here because what I did is I used more of, instead of a diatonic descending line, we can see that this A natural in the bass is actually going to be stepping outside of the scale. And what that does is that gives us the 5, 7 of the 4. We have a secondary dominant. Remember, when you see yourself stepping out of the key using accidentals, the first thing you should think is this a secondary dominant? And it actually is, and it's the secondary dominant of the 4, which means we don't even need to read those notes. We know it's got to be the 4, right? Okay, now I'm sorry I had to do this because it was just what my heart asked me to do, but I turned the 4 into a minor 4, which of course leads us to a 1, 6, 4, but a 1 there for us to remember. All right, that leads us to the 5, 7, and then we get to the outro, okay? So the outro is just this really pretty little classical motif that you see sometimes where you go back and forth between the 1 and the minor 3, all right? So we have the 1 to the minor 3, from the 1 to the minor 3, and then, are you ready for this surprise, is that we end up playing a D major. Now, here's the thing. We're not doing hardcore forms and analysis or theory right now. We're just learning to scratch the surface on looking at chords. So instead of figuring out what kind of crazy Roman numeral we can call that D major, let's just put D major, right? We have the 3, and then you kind of have this chord that's not in the key, but it sounds pretty cool, as you'll see. All right, we keep walking up that chord right here, just the D major triad, and finally that brings us back to our B, all right, or our 1. Okay, now with the intro, you'll notice that it's actually the exact same thing in both hands. So, you know, try it out in both hands, but remember that you don't have to read a different thing for each hand. It's exactly the same. So there we have our B. There's our diminished chord. Here's our minor 2. Little melody note there in the right hand. Right, and then you might want to try that in your left hand. And then, you know, you could put it together. Let's take a look at the left hand starting on line 2. Notice the bass voice is held out with a dotted half note. Here comes the surprise chord. Fantastic. All right, let's start with our right hand. We'll start on the last measure of line 2, and it'll go like this. There we have it. All right, and let's put it hands together now. All right, there you have it. And now we are finished with Unit 3. If you'd like to purchase any of the lesson outlines, sheet music, or rhythm warm-ups, or more, you can do so from my website, pianodojo.com. Next week, we'll be starting Unit 4, which is 4-note chords. All right, so this is an awesome unit. It's going to be very long. It's going to be the longest unit by far of any of the other ones, but we're going to learn all of our 4-note chords and the scales that go with them. We're also going to be starting a whole new world with our rhythm warm-ups, looking at triplets and eventually 16th notes. So great work so far. Happy practicing, and I'll see you next week in Unit 4.